It was the kind of text message you don't come back from. I was standing by the printer in the marketing suite, double-checking the final proofs for a client pitch when my phone buzzed. I glanced at it without thinking, like I always did. A quick glance, a reflex. Then I froze. The screen read, "You weren't supposed to find out like this. I'm sorry. We never meant to hurt you." From my wife, Julia. I didn't open the thread right away. Something inside me cracked in that exact moment, and I remember looking up and seeing my boss, Charles Langford, stepping out of the conference room straightening his tie. He gave me the faintest nod, like nothing was wrong. But I hadn't even seen his face yet when the next message lit up. It started after that conference in Boston. It just happened. Please don't do anything crazy. Suddenly, I was cold all over. We were just there 3 weeks ago. Julia had dropped me off at the airport, kissed me goodbye, said she'd miss me. I'd gone for 3 nights to pitch a campaign to a healthcare tech firm with Charles. A campaign I built from the ground up, my idea, my strategy, my research. And apparently, that was also the weekend my wife and my boss decided I was expendable. I left the printouts on the machine, walked to my office, and locked the door behind me. Sat down slowly. Read the entire thread. It wasn't just one night. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was months. Dinner at our house when I was working late. Julia, helping Charles with interior design ideas. Because that's what she does, she stages homes for realtors. Apparently, she'd been helping him a lot. The messages were a mix of guilt, excuses, and rationalizations. They were scared I'd find out, scared I'd ruin everything. She swore it didn't mean she didn't love me, just that she'd felt lost lately, that Charles had helped her feel seen. There was something so rehearsed about the whole thing, like she'd written it on a notepad first, tried it out loud in the mirror, and then copied it into a message. I didn't reply, not to her, not to him. Instead, I sat there and stared out the window at the skyline, the same skyline I used to be proud of when I first landed this job. When I was 29 and had clawed my way up from nothing, from freelancing in my basement, from 2 failed startups and a student loan I'd finally paid off. Now 37, I was the marketing director at one of the most respected firms in the city. I thought I'd made it. Turns out, I'd just built a bigger target on my back. The final blow came that Friday afternoon, in a room that smelled like espresso and lies. Charles called me in with HR, some nonsense about restructuring. Said it was time for a shift in leadership tone, that the board wanted someone more digitally native. The words felt pre-chewed, fed to him by someone else, maybe even Julia. "We appreciate everything you've done, Noah," he said, leaning forward with this false gravity, like he was already writing the eulogy for my career. "But your skill set doesn't align with where we're headed. No warnings. No performance review issues. Just a man smiling as he took the one thing he hadn't stolen yet, my job." I didn't yell, didn't flip a desk, didn't say a word. I signed the severance papers, shook hands with Denise from HR, and walked out of that building without a single box of belongings. I left everything I'd built behind, the award plaques, the marketing roadmaps, even the signed campaign poster from our biggest client launch last year. Let them keep the bones. They thought they'd broken me, that I'd take the money, maybe drink too much for a while, then resurface 6 months later at some lesser agency or begging for a consulting gig. They didn't know what I'd already started planning the moment I saw those messages. Because some betrayals don't make you fall apart. They make you disappear. They make you dangerous. I didn't speak to Julia again. Not after that Friday. I didn't respond to her texts. I didn't return the single phone call she tried to make the following Sunday, around the same time I knew Charles would be at his country club. She was testing the silence, seeing if I'd break it. I didn't. I'd moved into a short-term apartment in the warehouse district by then. Concrete floors, exposed pipes, no soul. But it was quiet, and I could think. I sold the Lexus, downgraded to a beat-up Volvo that didn't attract attention. I shaved my beard, stopped wearing suits. I didn't want to be the man she recognized. I didn't want to be anyone recognizable at all. People at work didn't reach out much. Charles had spun some PR line about me wanting to pursue personal projects. A couple colleagues texted me half-hearted condolences, but I knew most of them had probably seen it coming. A few probably thought I'd burned out. Maybe I had. But burnout didn't feel like this. Burnout wasn't this clear, this focused. I started tracking everything. I pulled old pay stubs, emails, project decks, dug through every contract I'd ever worked on. My name was on almost none of it. Always team contribution, always executive-led. I remembered now how Charles always insisted on presenting to the board alone. Said it was better optics. Said it was about keeping hierarchy clean. I realized I'd been invisible long before they fired me. What hit harder was what I found when I started digging into Julia's finances. We'd always had separate accounts, a habit from our early days when money was tight and trust was built in monthly budgets. But we'd shared access, casually. I still had login info to one of her retirement accounts. She probably never thought to change it. That's where I saw it. A $22,000 wire transfer from a company account I recognized, Langford Strategies, made 3 weeks ago. The week after Boston. The week after they'd slept together for the first time, according to her texts. It was labeled, Creative Consultation, Q3 Branding. My wife doesn't do branding. She doesn't even know what a campaign deck is. She stages kitchens and throws pillows on couches. But now she was getting paid more than most of our junior strategists to consult. I kept going. More wires. Smaller amounts. All from Charles's company. All disguised as legitimate contract work. It wasn't just an affair. It was compensation. Hush money. Or maybe just his way of buying her loyalty, dressing it up in legitimacy. He was building her up while dismantling me. Quietly, surgically. The worst of it came a few days later. I'd been watching their moves from afar. Her Instagram went dark, but Charles's wife, Ellen, was still posting. A vacation in Santa Barbara. A gala fundraiser. All smiles. No clue. And Julia had moved out of our house. A friend told me she was staying in some upscale condo building that Charles used for client housing. But then I saw the email. It came from a PR contact I knew, someone who'd owed me a favor from a product launch 3 years ago. She forwarded me a draft release under embargo. Langford Strategies launches Hearts and Minds, a new social impact program for underserved women entrepreneurs. Julia's name was in the byline. Co-founder. Alongside Charles. They were branding her, literally. Making her the face of some charity-scented, corporate tax-deductible virtue project. With smiling headshots in pastel colors and some watered-down mission statement about economic empowerment through creative enterprise. It was nothing. It was nonsense. But it was calculated. Charles was planting her in the industry as someone meaningful, someone legitimate. And he was doing it fast. By the end of the week, 3 outlets had picked it up. Julia had a LinkedIn post with 500 likes and a flood of sycophants congratulating her on her vision. They'd erased me in less than a month. That was the breaking point. Not the affair. Not the firing. Not even the money. It was the ease of it all. The speed with which they rewrote the story. The fact that no one even paused to ask where I'd gone. That weekend, I sat at the kitchen table of the apartment. A folding chair, a stack of notes, 2 monitors glowing in the dim light. I started sketching something I'd been thinking about since before any of this happened. Back when I was still working on the healthcare pitch in Boston. A side idea. A thought I hadn't shared with anyone. What if there was a way to offer branding and marketing services, real services, not vanity projects, to nonprofits, health orgs, and social enterprises, but for free? What if we built an agency that took no profit, just results, and let corporations fund it as part of their CSR budgets? What if I gave the work away, but used that generosity to drain the very clients Charles depended on? It wouldn't be revenge, exactly. It would be something cleaner, quieter. But first, I had to find out who really owned those clients, and how loyal they were to him. It started with a spreadsheet. I'd built the first version in a night, a simple list of every client Charles had locked in over the past 5 years. I knew the names by heart, had handled most of their early strategy before he swooped in for final presentations and handshakes. Fortune 100s, healthcare conglomerates, socially conscious consumer brands. The kind of clients that cared about optics. The kind of clients that posted impact reports and ESG goals in pastel fonts every quarter. I cross-referenced every single one with their public philanthropic partnerships. Then I started calling in favors. Not directly, never directly. I didn't want Charles catching wind of anything, and I knew too many people in the industry still carried his business cards in their wallets. So I reached out to the ones I trusted. A former colleague who'd moved into nonprofit PR. An ex-client turned friend who ran a grant foundation. A data analyst I used to mentor who owed me his last job. I didn't tell them everything. Just that I was starting something new, something nonprofit, something quiet but big. Marketing services at no cost for vetted charitable orgs, funded through strategic partnerships with corporations who needed the write-off and the visibility. I pitched it with calm intensity, told them it was about ethics, about rebuilding something cleaner, about meaning. They believed me, because every word was true. But what I didn't say was this. Every company I approached, every partner I invited into this new venture was one of Charles's. Not legally, not officially, but practically. They were his foundation, his retainer base, his image. And one by one, I offered them an exit door. The nonprofit, which I called Framework Collective, was registered under a public charity code, with a clean paper trail and no obvious ties to me. I hired a friend of a friend, a soft-spoken woman named Carmen who had spent 10 years in nonprofit finance, to be its first official director. On paper, she ran everything. In reality, I designed every campaign, every slide, every angle. We launched with 3 clients, a medical NGO in Uganda, a women's health clinic in rural Mississippi, and a housing justice initiative in Detroit. All 3 had been past causes promoted by Charles's clients in shallow PR campaigns, awareness months, and token partnerships that fizzled out after 1 quarter. Now, they were getting full-service creative, digital media buys, full brand architecture. Free. And then I started emailing the corporate donors. We can help you rebuild trust with your audience. We'll deliver measurable impact, and you get the brand lift. No shady billing, no agency markup. The catch? You fund the work. But we deliver it directly to the cause. No middleman. No Charles Langford. Within 6 weeks, I had 6 corporate sponsors and more in the pipeline. And they were big. A global pharmaceutical company. A clean energy startup with IPO ambitions. Even a luxury brand trying to clean up their supply chain image. The magic was simple. We did better work than Langford strategies because we weren't trying to squeeze margin out of purpose. We were just trying to be real, to make something matter. And for companies looking to polish their image, that was gold. The first campaign dropped in late March. It was for the Mississippi Women's Health Clinic. A series of subway ads in D.C., timed perfectly with a congressional hearing on reproductive care. The creative was bold but clean. No outrage, just truth. The sponsor, a healthcare data company, was branded in the corner. Tastefully. Enough to be noticed, not enough to be accused of co-opting the cause. Within 48 hours, it was on 3 national news sites. 48 more, and Fast Company called it a case study in post-corporate impact design. They called Framework Collective the next evolution in brand responsibility. I didn't do interviews. Carmen handled that. She spoke gently, intelligently, about rethinking the agency model. Her voice was calm, neutral, no trace of vengeance. But behind the scenes, I was watching Charles's castle crack. A week later, a client dropped his firm. Then another. By April, 3 of his biggest retainer accounts had shifted community engagement budgets to Framework Collective. On paper, they were just reallocating their CSR funds. But inside the boardrooms, I knew the message was clear. They didn't need him anymore. They had something better, something cheaper, something cleaner. Julia still hadn't reached out, but I knew she saw it. She was tagged in posts about Framework, about Carmen, about the work. Her nonprofit, the one she co-founded with Charles, had gone quiet. Their second launch never happened. The website hadn't been updated since February. I heard from someone that the gala they were planning was postponed indefinitely. Charles had stopped making public appearances altogether. I wasn't done. Not yet. There was one campaign left. One that I'd saved for last. Because it was about him. It wasn't petty. It was professional. I didn't name him, didn't smear him, didn't leak anything. I just launched a series of billboards across the city with this line. If your agency spends more time polishing their image than yours, it might be time for a new one. That was it. White background. Black text. The Framework logo. The message landed. LinkedIn lit up. Quietly at first. Marketers posting cryptic comments, vague claps, sideways compliments. Then louder. Someone posted a photo of the billboard outside Charles's building. The caption read, "Oof." By the end of the week, a reporter called. Not for an interview. For confirmation. She had a source who said Charles had lost 6 major clients in 8 weeks. That his team was hemorrhaging staff. That his agency was under internal review after mishandling a racial justice campaign for a fast fashion brand. She asked if I wanted to comment. I said I didn't know anything about Langford strategies. which was true, because I didn't care about them anymore. I cared about what was next. Because revenge isn't rage. It's precision. And mine had just begun. You'd think the moment of confrontation would come with shouting, a slammed door, a broken glass. But when it finally happened, it was a breakfast meeting. A white tablecloth, 2 mugs of untouched coffee, and Charles Langford sitting across from me in a cashmere coat, pretending he hadn't burned my life down 6 months earlier. He'd reached out through a mutual contact, said he wanted to talk, off the record, in his words. Carmen had flagged it when she got the email, forwarded it to me with a one-line subject, your move. I agreed to meet at a cafe near the park. Neutral ground. Familiar enough that we wouldn't draw eyes. It was the same place he used to hold intern welcome breakfasts. Same place I once sat across from him, years ago, while he told me I was destined for the big chair someday. I remember believing him. Now, I just watched him sit down like nothing had changed. He smiled, a little slower than he used to. Older, thinner, more tired. The tan was gone. The charm cracked around the edges. I waited for him to speak first. Noah, he said, his voice too smooth, too deliberate. You've been busy. I didn't respond. He tried again. Framework Collective is impressive. A little aggressive in your positioning, maybe, but smart. Very smart. I stirred my coffee without looking up. Is that why you're here? To give compliments? Charles leaned forward, elbows on the table like we were still colleagues. Like I hadn't seen the text messages, hadn't watched my career get yanked out from under me by the man who sat smiling now like nothing happened. I'm here because this little war you've started, it's gotten loud. I'm losing clients, Noah. Good clients. Relationships I've nurtured for years. They were never yours, I said calmly. You sold them strategy. I gave them results. He blinked, caught off guard. Maybe by the bluntness. Maybe because he hadn't realized how long I'd been holding that in. I get it, he said, sitting back. You're hurt. About how things ended. About Julia. There it was. He finally said it. But not an apology. Just a line in a business pitch. A throwaway clause before he got to what he really wanted. I'm not here to rehash any of that, he continued. I'm here because I think we can come to an understanding. You've built something special. I respect that. But we're stepping on the same clients. There's a lot of noise. The press is circling, and that's not good for either of us. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a card, black, embossed, pretentious, slid it across the table like it was a peace offering. I'm launching a new firm, he said. Clean slate. No baggage. And I want you to be part of it. I stared at the card. Langford and Gray. Of course it had a name. Of course he'd already moved on, like everything before was just a draft version of his empire. This man had destroyed my career, gutted my marriage, and now he wanted to fold me back in like it was all water under the bridge. No buyout. I asked. No acquisition offer? Just join the team? He smiled again. The nonprofit thing, it's brilliant, but it's not scalable. You'll burn out. You're too smart to play martyr forever. I let the silence stretch until it hurt. Then I leaned forward, slowly, deliberately, and said, You want to know the truth, Charles? I don't care if it's scalable. I don't care about valuation. I don't even care if it collapses in 2 years. His face twitched, just once. I care that every day you wake up knowing the people who used to trust you now look at someone else. I care that when your phone rings, it's not a client. It's a lawyer. Or worse, silence. I care that you're here, sitting across from me, begging me to put the fire out because for the first time in your life, you can't spin your way out of it. He looked down. That same look he gave the board when he didn't know the numbers. That flicker of panic beneath the surface. And then I said what I came to say. You didn't beat me. You revealed me. You made me dangerous. And now you want to stop what you started. Charles opened his mouth, but I was already standing. I left the card on the table. Didn't say goodbye. As I walked out, I saw Julia standing across the street. I don't know how long she'd been there. She wore sunglasses, hair pulled back tight, dressed like someone trying too hard to look unbothered. She didn't wave, just stood there, watching, like she knew what this meeting meant, like she knew something had ended. Or maybe she realized, too late, that I was never coming back. The press hit a week later. It wasn't mine. I didn't leak anything. I didn't need to. The story had been building on its own. Little mentions, quiet whispers, clients pulling out, job postings vanishing from Langford Strategies' careers page. But this was the moment it tipped. The headline read, When the conscience becomes the competitor. How a nonprofit agency is disrupting corporate branding. It ran on the front page of AdWest, the industry journal everyone reads but pretends they don't. I didn't do the interview. Carmen did. As always. Her quotes were diplomatic, thoughtful, respectful. She never mentioned Charles. Never mentioned Julia. Never even acknowledged the wreckage behind us. She just talked about Framework Collective. Our mission. Our model. Our impact. But the journalist did the math for them. The article pointed out which clients had left Langford Strategies and joined Framework. It highlighted the failed campaigns Charles's firm had fumbled in recent months. It cited anonymous sources from inside the agency describing massive attrition, chaotic leadership, and a culture of fear masquerading as innovation. It wasn't revenge. It was a requiem. By the end of that week, 5 more clients had reached out to us. 3 of them were among Charles's last standing partnerships. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't even feel relief. I felt quiet. That's the part no one tells you about revenge, the silence that comes after, the stillness. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like the moment after a storm, when everything's wet and broken and impossibly clean. I got an email from Julia 2 days after the article dropped. The subject line said, "Can we talk?" I let it sit for a day, then 2. Finally, I opened it. Noah. I read the article. I'm not sure what to say. It was impressive. You were always better than people knew. Than I knew. I'm sorry. For everything. I'm in a different place now. I'm not with Charles anymore. It ended weeks ago. There was never a clean ending, just distance. I think we were both pretending it was something it wasn't. You don't have to respond. I just wanted to say it. I wanted to acknowledge that I see what you've done. And I hope, someday, you find peace. Julia. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't reply. There wasn't anything to say. What was broken between us wasn't built for repair. There's no apology that rewinds a betrayal. Only acknowledgement. She gave me that. It was enough. Maybe more than I expected. Later that night, I walked the old neighborhood, past the coffee shop we used to sit at on Sundays, the bakery where she'd always get the almond croissant, the bookstore where we once argued about whether love stories were real. They are, I think, but not the way we tell them. They're not grand gestures and cinematic reunions. They're quiet, subtle. Sometimes, they're not about falling in love at all, but falling out and surviving it. That night, I walked back to the apartment, sat at the table, and opened a fresh document. A pitch deck. But this one wasn't for revenge. It wasn't even for Framework. It was something new. Because the truth was, I'd already won. Not because I'd destroyed Charles, though he was finished. His new firm never launched. Investors pulled out. Staff left. The silence around his name in the industry was louder than any scandal. And Julia, from what I'd heard, quietly returned to design staging, working solo out of a small studio in the East Side. No, the real win was something smaller. Something deeper. I'd become the kind of man they couldn't imagine. They'd built their schemes thinking I'd fold, that I'd lash out, that I'd fall apart. Instead, I built something. I took the wreckage and turned it into a cathedral. Framework Collective went on to partner with 5 global nonprofits, 10 Fortune 500 CSR departments, and helped rebrand over 100 underfunded community initiatives. Not because of me, but because of the model. Because people wanted to believe again. In something honest. And now, I wanted to build something even more radical, something sustainable. A fellowship. A school. A way to train other creatives to build without compromise. But I wasn't racing anymore. The fury was gone. I'd done what I came to do. And now, there was space to imagine what came next. As I stared out the window at the city, no longer mine, not theirs either, just a place full of noise and lights and people trying, I realized something. Revenge didn't give me peace, but it gave me distance. And sometimes, that's enough. I closed the laptop, poured a glass of wine, sat back, and finally, let the silence stay.